Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mother with a Voice. Today, I have with me Tiffany, and Tiffany's going to tell us a little bit of her story, also some similarities with my case. And so, I'm welcoming Tiffany today. Tiffany, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Tiffany Wilson. Um, I'm in the the family court system with Los Angeles Superior Court. I've been trying to get my son back since March, the day they took him. I would say the next day when I got down to what they were speaking of in court as far as this medical report that I never had any knowledge of. Since March 18th, I've been trying to get my son back. I haven't seen him in over 905 days now. And yes,
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And Tiffany, at what age was your son when they took him, and what age is he now?
um, he was taken 10 days before his fourth birthday, and he is now 6 years old. He's six and a half. He'll be seven March 17th. I
Yeah,
mean March 27th, I'm sorry.
very similar to my case because my son was about to hit his fourth birthday as well, so I can relate to you on that. Now, let's back up here. The your son's father, where did he come into play? How did this happen?
Wow. My son's father was absent. Not absent because I didn't allow him. He chose to be absent. He is a pastor of a church called Disciples of Christ. He's part of that whole umbrella of Disciples of Christ. And when I found out he was a pastor, which was about 2 years after I met him and had been dealing with him, I found out he was a pastor. I did not back away, or I should have, but I didn't. When I got pregnant, he wanted me to abort. I contemplated it because when I told him that I was pregnant, just the look in him, the anger, and like, no, it was just like, whoa, I had never seen that face. Um, he just pretty much assumed that I was going to do it. And when I told him I didn't decide that, and like I said, he became angry. When he realized that I wasn't going to abort by the time I hit my fifth, 6 month, that's when more, the ugliness in him that I had never seen was out. I remember him telling me one time, "Oh, I don't know if I should have invited you over for your favorite meal and I would have cooked it for you." And then followed by, it was a laugh. Or was I going to poison you? Yeah, I would have probably poisoned you. And I was like, whoa. I kind of became nervous of him. I didn't know who he was, what was like, I didn't get it. So I stayed away. I moved away as far as not moving out of the state or the city. I just moved away from him. Like I did not interfere in his life. I stopped going to the church, everything, because I was a member of the church. Um, he told me not to put his name on my son's birth certificate. He told me that he was not going to sign the birth certificate. Don't worry about filing for child support or anything because he was not going to be on the birth certificate. Therefore, he had no legal connection or anything to do with the baby. Um, I was told that he didn't want to see my face around or have my son's face be known. I should pretty much go in hiding. I recall him sending me a text saying that the baby was not a blessing, it was a curse, that my son was a demon seed or part of a demon seed. So I assumed that he was speaking that I was a demon and that my son was the seed of a demon. But his exact words were that Eson was, the text read to me was that this is not a blessing, it's a curse, and that Eson is a demon seed and he comes from a demon seed. I mean, he comes from a demon. And it was hurtful. And so I just made it at that moment, okay, no problem. I won't ask you to sign a birth certificate. I'm not coming after you for money, any of it. And that was that.
And then from
After,
there forward, at what point did he finally come around and decide he wanted custody?
wow. So my son was about a year and some change, for almost like a year and a half. And he had been reaching out saying, I need to come to church. You shouldn't be staying away from church. And I was a little confused because I was like, that's what you wanted. But at the same time, he knew that like, my whole thing was being back in church and trying to be spiritual because I had stepped away from being in church. I didn't trust the church people. So I went maybe once or twice. And then that Mother's Day came in 2019. Mother's Day came and I decided to take the baby and my older two sons to church. I sat in the back. I didn't normally sit where I normally would sit. I came in late and, so I wouldn't be a distraction, um, and my son went to speak to him because he actually had somewhat of a relationship with my older two sons, to some degree,
So your older two sons, they're not that's not their father. Is that
no,
right?
they're
Okay.
not. He's not the father of my older two sons. Um, so he saw the baby and that was it. He never touched him, held him, asked to touch him, asked to see him, nothing. But at that time, I found out that he was with a lady, who works with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. At that time, I didn't know that, but that was his girlfriend. She knew who I was and I didn't know who she was. She pretty much approached me and told me that she needed to talk to me, but I was a little taken back because I didn't know who she was. And I declined. I walked away and I declined. Coming to find out afterwards, oh, she's a sheriff. Okay, what does that mean? But that's his girlfriend. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? I didn't have to talk to her. And that was that. The following week, she approached me and said that her and I will deal with the child. I was not to speak to him. They were going to be getting married, and she didn't want any other women in his face. And just her whole approach to it, I did not agree with it. I pretty much told her how I felt. I told her that he had not been a part of my son's life. He had nothing to do with it. And until he can deal with and meet and figure what's what with his son, I didn't have anything that I needed to talk to her about. That she needs to talk with him about anything. I'm not dealing with her. I don't know you. I didn't have a child with you. I had a child, and he happens to be the father or the seed that helped create my, my offspring. So what did I need to speak to her for? That was my attitude. Maybe if she came with a different approach, I would have responded differently. But it was already a negative situation when the father of my son had no dealings with him. So I don't know, it just seemed a little backwards to me.
So did she ever introduce herself as to who she was when she came and spoke to you, or you just heard through others who she was?
I heard through others, but when she tried to approach me, it was just her whole demeanor very, I guess, and now that I know she's an officer or she works with the sheriff's department, maybe it's just a demeanor and she doesn't know when to pull back outside of work. But it
Okay.
was almost like I had like, hi, I'm Kiana and you need to speak to me kind of thing. And like I said, I just was a bit taken back, like, oh, hello. But you're not gonna get to come in and pretty much demand what you want from me and I don't know you. We don't have a relationship.
Okay.
I'm a very easygoing person. So I just feel like it definitely could have been handled differently.
Okay.
Her approach could have been different.
And then what happened from there moving forward?
Um, from there, he asked to see Isan, and of course, I told him yes, he was able to. He said he wanted to pick him up, and I said that would be fine, but let's make sure that the baby's going to be okay because he's not a little child where he's just it's going to be okay and adaptable. He doesn't know you yet, like So, um, how about I send my older son or one of my sons with him so that you guys could, meet each other and, go from there, get to know each other as father and son. And she declined and said that they didn't need to do that and that they were bringing her other children. She has three other children from two other relationships. So that they wanted them all to meet, but that would have been okay, but he needs to get he needs to get that bond with his child, and let's not shock Isan like that, you know?
Yeah.
But and after that, he threatened um that he would take me to court, and I told him, do whatever you need to do. One, I just need you to sign because I was going to be going out of the country the following year in May of 2020, and I needed to get my son's passport signed. So when all of that was taking place, I also said, hey, I need to get my son's passport signed. Well, he declined to sign the passport. But it wasn't until we went through these court proceedings that I found out I never needed his signature because he never signed the birth certificate.
Wow.
So it was a can of worms that was open that didn't need to be, in my opinion now. Um, so he said he was going to sue me. I mean, not sue me, he was going to take me to court. So I ended up filing papers so I can get him to sign the birth certificate. And so, I mean, not sign the birth certificate, sign for the passport. And from there, it just when he asked for, in his moving papers, he asked for an hour a week, I believe. And then after 6 weeks, he wanted 2 hours a week. The judge at that time was like, an hour? No, we're going to give you. And they gave him Tuesdays and Thursdays for 3 hours, Saturdays for another 3 hours, or it may have been 6 hours. I don't recollect totally. And then child support. The attorney I had suggested, why don't you have, or read my file and said, you don't have child support. And I said, no, I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. And that's when it went haywire.
Yeah, my attorney did the same thing, suggested child support. It's like a direct notion, you got to do this. And as soon as that happens, they get upset. So
Yeah.
this is
So
the okay.
the child support was filed. And then next thing I knew, it was the games play. It was time for us to meet. And he would say, oh, I don't see you. I don't see you. And then 10 minutes, 15 minutes pass. And I'm like, I'm standing right here in front of the Chuck E. Cheese. Oh, I didn't see you. I don't see you. So I'm leaving. The visit's over. And then I literally would watch him driving by me.
So he just
And
didn't
I'm
spend time with him.
right. And then I would call. I've seen, I'm looking at you. No, you don't. No, you don't. I know what I just saw. And then he would put in the talking parents, oh, you didn't show for the visit. And he would do that a couple of times. Or he would park in a place that he normally wouldn't park at when it was an open space. And I'm sitting and I'm looking for him. And then he'll say, I didn't show, or I was parked somewhere different, which I'm entitled to, but you see me, why wouldn't you say anything? Instead, he would come, or that one occasion he came and he was recording. You see, she's just sitting here in the car. She didn't get out. And then when it made a police report with the sheriff's department in Marina Del Rey stating that I didn't facilitate the visit. And I just was like, wow, this guy, unbelievable. And those were the games that he would play, went back to court, and then all of a sudden he wants 50-50.
And 50-50 typically is because if you get that, no one has to pay child support.
Yeah.
And then how did it get to full custody?
Wow, full custody came in. They assigned, that's when Carla Garrett got on the case in July of 2021.
And Carla
He,
Garrett's the judge, right?
she is currently still the judge. Um, Carla Garrett got on the case. That first hearing, he gave a crop shit of lies. Excuse my vocabulary. Sorry. He gave a crop of lies in the moving or the motion for modification. I responded. When he came to serve those papers or had them served, they had someone come in my house at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. I had my family here during that time visiting from out of state. And my cousins, their kids, 16 years old, went to the door to answer the door. And they threw the papers through the peephole at them. I explained that to the judge. They served kids. I didn't even get the papers until 2 days later when they said, oh, and we forgot, they gave us these papers. They threw the papers. And I was like, what? And then I noticed that it was you know, the motion. So I had to piece the pieces together and respond as best as I could. We went to court. The judge assigned minors counsel Jeanette O. Martinez. She's in Downey, maybe Whittier now. I'm not sure, but Downey, Whittier area. She got on the case. Literally 3 days before court is when she originally reached out to me. When I had reached out to her 3 days or the same, no, 2 days after court. It may have been one day because they gave him the visits right away. And she never responded. She never anything. She didn't even fill out the form that she was supposed to fill out. I believe it's the FL 3400 until 3 or 4 days before that court date when they're supposed to fill it out 10 days, I believe, before. The other thing was that she did not listen to or look at anything. In between that time, my son had come home with a swollen jaw. And of course, I said something to the therapist. The therapist told me to report it. CPS did not take my report. I told him, he made the report. CPS came out and investigated it. The social worker that came out was LaShawn Tapscott. When she came out, she said all these things. He sounds like this, and that. Then the next thing you know, within a week and a half's time, it flipped. They were having this meeting with minors counsel. I didn't care because there was nothing ever that I hid or lied about. We went to court September of 2021. All I hear in court is that the allegations is against me. So I'm thinking, for what and why? First thing I do is I call LaShawn Tapscott with DCFS or CPS, whichever it is. And I asked her what happened. How is the allegations is on me? She said, because you were the one who bruised the baby. I said, where did you get that from? There were text messages that the father sent in. And I said, what text, like what messages that would say I did it? He pretty much manipulated the facts and said that when I was complaining and asking about the bruising, he said that I said it was a bite. And that wasn't true. The conversation was from a previous conversation where my son was actually being bitten up by mosquitoes or whatever. And I suggested, putting some type of off or lavender oil or whatever on him so that the mosquitoes or what have there that was in his place around his home would not bite on Isan. And they never even looked and rectified it. Moving on, now we're into January and let's go backwards. At that hearing in September, they told me that I had to take 15 classes of therapy. I needed to put Isan into play therapy. I don't even know where the 15 classes came from, why that number, but I had already enrolled Isan into therapy, was trying to enroll him into play therapy prior to, which is why the call got made to CPS from Isan's jaw being swollen. So I didn't understand, why are you guys wanting me to take classes when these are things that I'm already doing for my self-preservation? You get what I'm saying? So I still went ahead. At that point, now it's an order that 15 classes, but why me and not him? What what results? What evidence do you have that I need 15 classes of counseling? I took the counseling. I actually was bothered with the attorney that I had at that time. Like, how could you not intervene? How could you allow this to happen? What would be any reason? So I got rid of that attorney and I hired another law firm. And when I began to show them everything, the files, they were like, whoa. But in between that time, there was another incident where Isan came home and he had a knot on his head and two of his eyes were darkened. I didn't know what would happen. I asked Isan. He did not say originally what happened. However, he told a friend of mine's or babysitter that he had been hit and pretty much I'm assuming that he probably fell on something or what have there, but in their conversation, and it would take her to give more information so that I don't misquote anything. She said, Tiffany, you need to look into this. In that timing, he went to his therapy that Monday. The therapist saw it but did not say anything. And I pretty much asked her to hold on because I wanted to find out, get to the bottom of it so that no one could say I said something that wasn't so. Um, the social worker ended up coming out that Wednesday. They were supposed to be there Monday. They came out on Wednesday and they sent another social worker because there had been another complaint that was in before. Again, a second complaint from wherever. And it was, I guess, their pop up. So they came, they separated me and my son, and the social worker asked Isan, I wasn't there. And Isan told her what took place. She immediately called me and asked me to take him to a place called the Hub for CPS. And it's a medical facility where they do an examination on the child. They ask questions, they do whatever with the parent and the child separate. And Isan repeated the same thing. So they ended up closing the case as inconclusive. And what I found inconclusive is they're not saying that it's not that it there's the evidence is there, but they can't say that it's not the mother or not the father. It's when they don't know
They
where
don't
it
know
came
who it is.
from, but this is what happened. So the case was closed as inconclusive. I believe that case was closed as inconclusive and they didn't do more investigation, either because of the BS that they heard from dad, or the fact that dad's church, Disciples of Christ, have a contract with DCFS. And I won't say that Disciples of Christ, but I know 105th Christian Church, which is where he pastors, they have a contract with DCFS for children when they're being taken, that it's like a safe haven. They also facilitate visits for family to reunify or to visit with each other when one of the parents or whomever, needs a little mediation or supervision, I guess.
Mhm.
So it's all bewildering to me how they just totally ignored those things. And I think it has a lot to just do with the dynamics of that circle. Him being a pastor, having a contract with DCFS. His now wife, they're now married, is a lieutenant now with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. I just think it's just a circle of crazy BS and
Basically,
corruption.
a lot of different individuals that are supposed to be credible are stacked up against you. And in
Yes,
your situation, you're just following court orders, letting your son go to visitation, and he's coming back with injuries.
yes.
And you're
And
asking for somebody to intervene, help, and they just keep coming back with it's inconclusive. We don't know who it is.
or that mom did it.
Yeah.
That mom's the loony one, and it's BS. If I was hurting my son wouldn't be crying to not be away from me and crying when he's there or in distress. And I have tons of videos where my son is in distress, or when he comes back, he's looking. I mean, I don't mind sharing them because these are things that happened. They took it as I'm recording and you can't coerce. If you see the videos, there's no coercing in this.
I mean, how old is he at that age, too?
He was 3.
3. You can't.
Yeah, remember he never, yeah, he's 3. When, although when he was 1.5, when the visits first started, he started the visit and there was 4. So it was just a lot of things that was happening, even when he saw him. So when he first had his first visit was October of 2019. Isan was already over a year and a half. Um, each time I would pick up Isan or went to go meet, he was crying. There was times I would have to get Isan to sleep so that he would be with them when he woke up versus crying before I had to take him. Um, there was times where one incident where, Isan had issues with his digestive system at a young age. And I hate to be, but Isan came back and he literally had whole beans in his stool. And I was like, who would give a child this young, this big, and this many beans? So he was unable to pass. That was a concern for me, and I was bothered. So I decided one of the visits, I did not send him. I wasn't going to send him while he was still ill. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I didn't send him. And it was a numerous of times where it was just like, so one day, um, he was late. I waited longer than the 15 minutes. And it just was always negative. His girlfriend at the time got out of the car and she was like, give us the baby. And it was just the whole, I don't move easily. You cannot intimidate me easily. So I didn't move, bring the baby. I ignored them. I didn't move. They didn't move. And we went our way. He went to court on the ex parte, stating that I was not facilitating visits. And the judge did not hear it. He did not show for 4 visits. I stopped showing. I did not hear from Penn for a year
Mhm.
because he just decided he wasn't going to do anything. In between that time, he got married. He had another child. So I'm sure life, but in you having this life there, this is what happens over with my son. And it was okay. I had always I never thought that I would have had to do it on my own and my any of my children not have their father around. But I knew what I was dealing with and up against. So I continued to take care of my son. I never called him, bothered him, any of it. Um, and then the Raiders won. And I got a text in November of 2020. Oh, I thought I'd reach out and see how Isan's doing because the Raiders won. And I just did not respond. I had nothing to say.
Wow.
So back to the custody, I did a motion for reconsideration because of the counseling, the this, the that. Um, in that hearing, and I don't even understand how so quickly, the judge ordered him, us to have 50-50 custody and him to have decision-making authority.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you pretty much gave him custody. So legal custody. And he knows not enough about my son to make decisions.
Yeah.
That means if I say I want to go to Haiti, you're going to say no. And you make the decisions. So
They
what
gave
does that mean
him
for me?
control, essentially. Yeah.
And that just didn't make sense to me. Under what grounds? Why? When this guy had been absent. And he just were like red hairs the conversations. Like the whole thing. He'll put a little bit of the truth, and then he'll put this big ass lie out there, and the judge runs with it.
Hmm.
They run with it. And then when I'm trying to respond to it, it's just ridiculous. It's hard. But in that hearing, I went in for a motion for reconsideration, and my son was being taken. They never gave a motion saying this was happening, that was happening. It was being done. And I had no notice, no, my due process was totally violated. There was no notice of it, what was in plan or the ideal or the thought or whatever it is that they wanted. I had no, there was no notice for me to even respond to. It definitely wasn't a meaningful hearing and me being heard. It just, I couldn't even believe it was happening. That day in court, they took my cell phone. They went through my cell phone. The sheriff or the bailiff that was in the court started reading out loud my text messages, my phone log. I got upset. Of course, I tried to get my phone. I could not get my phone. The judge yelled at me, sit down. I was pissed. At the same time, I couldn't believe what was happening. I kind of had a moment of shutdown. Like, is this is is this happening? Am I hearing what I'm hearing? And then I just heard them say, sole legal and physical custody goes to father. On what grounds? What grounds? No one ever said. Then it was, oh, well, mom is the one. And I'm like, no, that's not true. My son just came back with a whole fingernail off, and his thumb was spraying. He had an infection under his finger, but yet you ordered 28 days with father, uninterrupted visits from mom. I had not seen my son for 28 days at that time.
Oh, wow. So he was already in father's care.
Yeah, and he got another injury. And I took him to the hospital. The hospital CPS said, "We don't believe that this child fell off of a bike. This is inconsistent with a bike fall." I took him to Children's Hospital. And I didn't even realize it until the time they told me that he did not have any scrapes. Like, where's his scrapes? If he fell off a bike, he should have a scrape on his thumb. His knees, his elbows, his head, or even his ankles. And when I thought about it, yeah, where was the scrapes? There was no scrapes. So they immediately, well, I won't say immediately, there was a social worker that came, but I wasn't sure if she was a social worker from the hospital or CPS, or if this was just one of the nurses trying to get the records, because they'll send people in there sometimes to get your information for the medical insurance. So I wasn't sure until CPS came in and they kept asking me about the story. And then I realized what was happening. And that's when I told them that this is how he came back to me. He was at his father's house from January 19th until February 14th. And that's how that happened. Some kind of way they still was able to circumvent CPS being involved. CPS reached out to me about his finger. I told them what happened. They said that it was medical neglect, that they waited, that they did not take him to the hospital to get it checked out. But then, like I said, I went to court on March 17th. Next thing I know, they're taking my son.
Yeah.
They did not allow me to leave the courthouse. They called the Long Beach Police Department, the detectives that was on the case for the child abuse. They it was bad. My son said that he was pretty much that his finger had been slammed in the door, and his words were that Mimi pushed me in the room and locked me up, and he gave the gesture of what happened to his hand. And even when the doctor heard it, he said that sounds more like what could have happened, not a bike fall.
And with
And
that, they pointed blame on you and you lost custody. dad received full custody, someone who wasn't even in his life. And we do have to sum it up. We're running out of time, but I do want to point out a few things. Since then, Typhanie has done a lot to speak out about basically the corruption that's happening in family court. She's been out there. I guess I'll let you tell it. What all have you done to help bring forth awareness to what's happening?
I've reached out to a lot of mother groups, support groups, trying to find out, is this like, what the heck? I have reached out to the Judicial Commission. I made a complaint about 10 days after my son was taken. It took me a moment because I was just devastated. I've reached out to the supervisors, the family law supervisors, which at that time was Eric Taylor. I reached out to him twice, three times through a letter. The third one he probably didn't get because it was during the time that they were transferring when Shelley Kaufman came in and Eric Taylor was leaving out. I have written to Gavin Newsom. I have tried to contact the mayor of Long Beach. I have protested and
And with
I,
all of that, Typhanie has actually been gagged with the DVRO.
oh, yes, now I just received on September 4th in the same court with Carla Garrett a domestic violence restraining order for flyers that one of the groups that I'm a part of um, put out at the church, on the cars outside of the church on the main street, and a few cars that were inside the parking lot, and flyers that were put out in the neighborhood by where he resides. No one ever threatened or harassed him. Even if the flyers were put out at the church or by his home, I don't see how that was a form of harassment. Maybe embarrassment, because the judge did ask me, did I intend to embarrass him? And I said, I didn't even think about embarrassment. I do this and I help other mothers. I've protested for other moms and dads in other situations where no one violated anything. So,
Well,
yeah,
I do thank Typhanie for coming on today. We are running out of time, but we're going to keep in touch with Typhanie and hope that she gets her son back because this is just ridiculous how they're kidnapping our kids. Thank you, Tiffany.
yeah. Thank you.